Love Found in the Rain, A Seattle Romance. Eleanor Brooks stood under the faded green awning of her bookstore, Pages and Rain, in Seattle's bustling Capitol Hill. The rain fell in a steady, silver drizzle, coating the streets with a reflective sheen. At 48, Eleanor had carved out a quiet life. The scent of old books filled her days, mingled with the soft hum of indie folk music and the comfort of routine. Pike Place Market was just a few blocks away, its energy spilling over with tourists dodging puddles, clutching coffee cups from the original Starbucks. Eleanor adjusted her wool scarf, her auburn hair, streaked with gray, tucked under a navy knit cap. Her hazel eyes scanned the street, lost in a familiar daydream. She was back in 1995, a 20-year-old at the University of Washington, when Seattle pulsed with grunge and endless possibility. When she was fearless. When she loved Daniel Harper. They'd met in a literature class, bonding over dog-eared copies of Kerouac and Plath. Nirvana's Nevermind blasted from dorm speakers, and they'd spent nights in Daniel's cramped apartment, sprawled on a second-hand couch, talking about art, love, and the future. Daniel's crooked smile made her heart race, his warm brown eyes like the coffee they drank at dawn. He was her first love, the one who made her feel infinite. But life had other plans. In her junior year, Eleanor's mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. She left school to care for her in Tacoma, breaking her own heart to leave Daniel behind. "I'll come with you," he'd said, his voice desperate outside her dorm. "I can't ask you to do that," she'd replied, tears streaming down her face. They promised to stay close, letters, calls, visits. But the letters dwindled, the calls faded, and 25 years slipped away like rain down a storm drain. Now, Eleanor was a widow. Her husband, Mark, had passed 5 years ago from leukemia. He'd been a high school history teacher, kind and steady, the safe choice after her mother's death. Their marriage was warm but quiet, lacking the fire she'd once known. She didn't regret it, but late at night, she wondered about Daniel. Did he still listen to the Smashing Pumpkins? Did he still drive that beat-up blue pickup truck? Did he ever think of her? The bell above the bookstore door jingled, pulling her from her thoughts. A man stepped in, shaking rain from his navy coat. He was tall, with graying hair and those same brown eyes. Something about him felt like a song she hadn't heard in years. He looked up, and their eyes locked. "Eleanor," he said, his voice soft, almost disbelieving. Her breath caught in her throat. It was him. Daniel Harper. "Daniel," she whispered, stepping forward. He smiled, that crooked smile she'd never forgotten. "I can't believe it's you," he said, running a hand through his damp hair. "I was walking by, saw the bookstore sign, and something told me to come in." Eleanor's hands trembled as she gestured to a corner table, where mismatched chairs sat beside a window. "Let me get you some coffee," she said, her voice steadier than her heart. In the shop's tiny kitchen, she fumbled with the coffee maker, her mind racing with questions. What was he doing here after 25 years? Was this fate, or just a cruel twist? They sat by the window, rain tapping the glass like a metronome. The bookstore was quiet, save for the soft strum of a Fleetwood Mac song, Landslide, fittingly nostalgic. Daniel sipped his coffee, his eyes tracing the lines of her face. "You haven't changed," he said. Eleanor laughed, brushing a strand of hair away. "Oh, I've got wrinkles, and gray hair now." He shook his head, his gaze steady. "Still the same Eleanor. Still beautiful." Her cheeks flushed, and she looked down at her mug. They talked, the years melting away with every word. Daniel had moved back to Seattle a month ago, after years in Chicago. He was an architect now, designing community centers and libraries across the Midwest. He'd been married to a woman named Claire, but they divorced 3 years ago. No kids, just a career that kept him on the move. "I thought about you," he admitted, stirring his coffee slowly. "Every time I heard, 'Come As You Are,' on the radio." Eleanor's heart skipped. "That was our song," she said, her voice catching. "We'd play it on repeat in your truck, driving to Alki Beach at midnight." Daniel nodded, his eyes distant. "I still have that truck," he said. It's beat up, rusted, but it runs. They laughed, the sound filling the empty shop. Memories flooded back, sneaking into concerts at the Showbox, dancing under the Fremont Bridge, stealing kisses in the rain. Eleanor remembered renting VHS tapes from Blockbuster, watching Reality Bites, curled up on Daniel's couch, arguing over whether Ethan Hawke's character was romantic or just a slacker. But she sensed a shadow in Daniel's words, something he wasn't saying. "What brought you back to Seattle?" she asked, her tone gentle but probing. He hesitated, his fingers tightening around his mug. "Just needed a change," he said, but his eyes flicked away. Eleanor didn't push, but the silence felt heavy. The conversation shifted to her life. She told him about Pages and Rain, how she'd opened it after Mark's death. "It's my sanctuary," she said. "Books don't leave you. They don't break your heart." Daniel's smile was soft, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm glad you found something you love," he said. As the rain slowed, Daniel suggested a walk. They wandered to Green Lake Park, where the air smelled of wet grass and pine. Families strolled by, and a street musician played, Born to Run, on an acoustic guitar. Eleanor felt young again, walking beside Daniel, her boots sinking into the damp earth. She caught him watching her, his gaze warm but searching. "What?" she asked, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Just remembering how you used to laugh," he said. "Like the world couldn't touch you." Her cheeks warmed. "I don't laugh like that anymore," she said. "Life's heavier now." He nodded, understanding. "Yeah, it is." They stopped at a bench overlooking the lake, watching ducks glide across the water. Eleanor's mind drifted to a night in 95. When Daniel had carved their initials into a tree nearby. "EB plus DH, he'd said, grinning. "Forever." She wondered if the tree was still there. She wondered if he remembered. "Remember that tree?" Daniel asked, as if reading her thoughts. Eleanor's breath caught. "You do." He nodded, pointing to a gnarled oak across the path. "It's still there. I checked last week." Her heart swelled, but she didn't know what to say. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Coffee at Pages and Rain, walks through Pike Place Market, evenings at a jazz club in Belltown, where a saxophonist played covers of Coltrane and Davis. Eleanor felt alive, like a part of her had been asleep for decades. Daniel brought back her old self, the girl who danced to the Cranberries, who dreamed of writing novels, who loved without fear. But fear was still there, lurking in her mind. She'd lost so much, her mother to cancer, Mark to illness, her younger self to time. Could she trust this feeling? What if Daniel left again? What if this was just nostalgia, not love? One evening, they sat at a diner on Capitol Hill, the kind with checkered floors and jukeboxes. Over burgers and milkshakes, Eleanor opened up about her marriage. "Mark was a good man," she said, picking at her fries. "But I married him because it felt safe. After Mom died, I was terrified of being alone." Daniel listened, his eyes never leaving hers. "Did you ever think about us?" he asked. "About what we could have been?" Eleanor's chest tightened. Every day, she wanted to say. Instead, she nodded. "I kept your mixtape," she confessed. "The one with Pearl Jam and Radiohead." Daniel's face softened. "I kept your letters," he said. "They're in a box in my attic. Every time I moved, I couldn't let them go." The jukebox switched to Wonderwall, and they both laughed. "God, we were such 90s kids," Daniel said. "Flannel shirts, bad haircuts, spending hours at Tower Records." Eleanor grinned. "You loved that mullet." He groaned, covering his face. "Don't remind me." But the lightness faded. Daniel's smile dimmed, and he looked down at his plate. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something," he said. Her stomach knotted. Here it was, the moment she'd been dreading. "I wasn't completely honest about why I came back." He took a deep breath. "Last year, I had a heart scare. Doctors found a blockage. They fixed it, stents, rehab, the whole deal. I'm fine now, but it changed me. Made me realize I'd been running from things, from you, from myself." Eleanor's mind spun. A heart scare. She saw Mark in the hospital, tubes and monitors, his hand cold in hers. "I can't go through that again," she whispered. Daniel reached for her hand, but she pulled back. "I'm fine now," he said, his voice firm. "I promise." But promises were fragile. She'd heard them before. 4 days, Eleanor avoided him. She threw herself into the bookstore, organizing author events, helping customers find novels. Her employee, Mia, a 25-year-old with a nose ring, noticed her distraction. "Boss, you okay?" Mia asked, stacking books on a shelf. Eleanor forced a smile. "Just tired, Mia." But Mia wasn't convinced. "Is it that guy? The one who keeps coming by?" Eleanor sighed. "It's complicated." Mia grinned. "Love's always complicated. But it's worth it, right?" Eleanor didn't answer, but Mia's words stuck with her. She walked alone through Volunteer Park, finding that old oak tree. The initials were still there, weathered but clear. EB+DH forever. She traced the letters with her finger, her heart aching. Why was she so afraid? Her best friend, Sarah, noticed the change too. They met at a cafe near Lake Union, sipping lattes as ferries crossed the water. Sarah, a 50-year-old divorcee with a blonde bob, leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "You're different, Ellie," she said. "Is it that guy from college? The one you used to talk about?" Eleanor stared at her cup. "He's back, Sarah, and I don't know what to do." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Do you love him?" Eleanor's throat tightened. "I think I always have." "Then what's stopping you?" Sarah asked. Eleanor shook her head. "What if I lose him, like I lost Mark?" Sarah reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "You can't stop living because you're scared. I learned that the hard way." Sarah had her own story, a marriage that ended when her husband left for someone younger. She was dating again, a photographer named Greg, but she was cautious, too. "Love's messy," Sarah said. "But it's the good kind of messy." That night, Eleanor sat in her apartment, the mixtape Daniel made her spinning in an old CD player. "Zombie" by the Cranberries filled the room, and she closed her eyes, remembering their college nights. They'd danced to this song in Daniel's apartment, barefoot, laughing, the world outside forgotten. She wanted to be that brave again. But there was another complication, her son, Ben. At 22, he was a grad student at UW, living in a shared house in the U District. He'd been 17 when Mark died, and he'd struggled ever since. Eleanor had told him about Daniel over dinner, and his reaction was cold. "Some guy from 25 years ago," he'd said, pushing his plate away. "What about Dad?" Eleanor tried to explain, but Ben shut down. "I don't want to meet him," he said. She didn't push, but it weighed on her. Ben was her anchor, the one piece of Mark she still had. Could she build a new life with Daniel if it meant hurting her son? Meanwhile, Daniel was facing his own battles. His younger sister, Laura, lived in Tacoma, a high school principal with a sharp tongue. She'd invited him to dinner at her house, a craftsman-style home filled with photos of her kids. Over pot roast, she grilled him. "You're seeing Eleanor again?" Laura asked, her eyes narrowing. "The one who broke your heart." Daniel sighed. "I'm the one who let her go, Laura." Laura shook her head. "You were a mess after she left. Don't do this to yourself, again." Daniel understood her worry. After Eleanor moved to Tacoma, he'd spiraled, partying too hard, dropping out of school for a semester. But Laura didn't know the whole story. She didn't know how much he'd loved Eleanor, how he still did. One rainy evening, Eleanor was closing the bookstore when Daniel appeared, soaked to the bone, holding a small brown package. "I made you something," he said, his voice steady despite the rain. She opened it, finding a new CD, a modern mixtape with their old songs and new ones. Smashing Pumpkins, Coldplay, The National. "I know you're scared," he said. "I am too. But I'd rather face that fear with you than spend another 25 years wondering." Eleanor's eyes blurred with tears. She thought of her life, safe, predictable, but hollow without him. "I don't want to wonder anymore," she said. She stepped forward, and he pulled her into his arms. The rain fell harder, but they didn't care. The next few months were a dance of joy and struggle. They spent weekends exploring Seattle, browsing stalls at Fremont Sunday Market, sharing scones at a coastal cafe in West Seattle, visiting a lighthouse on Puget Sound. But challenges lingered. Ben remained distant, refusing to meet Daniel. Eleanor tried talking to him, but he'd changed the subject, his jaw tight. Daniel's sister, Laura, was another hurdle. She invited Eleanor to dinner, ostensibly to catch up. But the evening was tense, Laura's questions sharp. "So, you're back for good?" she asked, slicing her chicken. Eleanor nodded, uneasy. "I never wanted to hurt him," she said. Laura's eyes softened, but only slightly. "He's my brother. I just want him happy. Slowly, things shifted. Ben agreed to meet Daniel for coffee, though it was awkward. You're not replacing Dad, Ben said, his voice low. Daniel nodded. I'd never try to. I just want to be part of your mom's life. Ben didn't smile, but he didn't walk away either. One evening, Eleanor and Daniel drove to Alki Beach, his old truck rattling along. They parked, watching waves crash under a starry sky. The radio played, Black, by Pearl Jam, and Eleanor felt young again, but wiser. Do you think we'll make it? She asked. Daniel's crooked smile returned. I think we already have, he said. They kissed, the ocean's roar blending with the music. Eleanor knew it wouldn't be perfect. There'd be arguments, doubts, fears. But she'd found love in the rain, and this time, she wasn't letting go. Their story wasn't without its storms. Eleanor and Daniel faced moments of doubt, like when Daniel canceled a dinner to deal with a work deadline, leaving Eleanor wondering if his career would always come first. She remembered how his ambition in college sometimes overshadowed their time together, like when he'd stay up all night sketching building designs while she waited for him to notice her. But he always made it up to her, showing up with a thermos of coffee and an apology, his eyes full of sincerity. Now, at Pages and Rain, he'd bring her favorite scones from a bakery near Pike Place, leaving them on the counter with a note, "For my favorite bookseller." Eleanor's heart softened each time, but the fear lingered. Could she trust him not to drift away again? One Saturday, they visited the Fremont Sunday Market, weaving through stalls of handmade jewelry and fresh produce. The air smelled of lavender and grilled corn, and a band played a cover of Fade Into You by Mozzie Star. Daniel bought her a small silver necklace with a book-shaped pendant, slipping it around her neck with a shy smile. It's perfect, she said, touching the pendant. Like you, he replied, and she laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. But later, at a coastal cafe in West Seattle, Eleanor noticed Daniel checking his phone more than usual. Everything okay? She asked, stirring her lat. He nodded, but his jaw was tight. Just work, he said. A project in Tacoma's falling behind. She wanted to believe him, but the old doubts crept in. Was he pulling away? Was this too good to last? That evening, they walked along Alki Beach, the waves crashing under a gray sky. Eleanor stopped, her boots sinking into the sand. Daniel, are you sure about this? About us? He turned to her, his eyes searching. Eleanor, I've never been more sure of anything. But I know I hurt you before. I won't do that again. His voice was steady, but she saw the flicker of fear in his eyes, mirroring her own. They stood there, the wind tugging at their coats, and she wanted to believe him. She wanted to let go of the past. Back at the bookstore, Mia, the young employee with the nose ring, became an unexpected ally. She'd seen Eleanor's mood swings, how she'd light up when Daniel visited but retreat into herself when doubts took over. You're overthinking it, Mia said one day, shelving a stack of romance novels. He looks at you like you're the only person in the room. My boyfriend doesn't even do that. Eleanor smiled. But Mia's words hit deep. Was she sabotaging herself? Was she so afraid of loss that she couldn't see what was right in front of her? That night, Eleanor called Sarah for advice. They met at a 90s-themed bar in Belltown, where a jukebox played Creep by Radiohead. Sarah sipped a martini, her blonde bob catching the neon lights. You're scared because it's real, she said. I get it. After my divorce, I didn't think I could trust anyone again. But Greg, he's patient. He's worth it. SOS, you're Daniel. Eleanor nodded, sipping her wine. Sarah was right, but the fear was stubborn. It clung to her like damp Seattle mist. Meanwhile, Daniel was navigating his own challenges. His sister, Laura, remained skeptical of his relationship with Eleanor. At another dinner in Tacoma, Laura brought it up again, her voice sharp over a plate of lasagna. You're jumping in too fast, she said, pouring wine. What if she leaves again? You barely survived last time. Daniel clenched his fork. Laura, I was the one who didn't fight for her. I let her go. I won't make that mistake again. Laura sighed, her eyes softening. I just don't want you hurt, Danny. You're all I've got. He understood her protectiveness. She'd been there through his darkest days, when he drowned his pain in late nights and bad decisions after Eleanor left for Tacoma. But Laura didn't see what he saw in Eleanor now, the way her laugh lit up a room, the way her fingers traced book spines with care. The way she made him want to be better. Back in Seattle, Daniel took Eleanor to a lighthouse on Puget Sound. The kind of place they dreamed of visiting as kids. The wind whipped through their hair as they climbed the spiral stairs, the ocean stretching out below. At the top, they stood close, their shoulders brushing. "I used to imagine us here," Daniel said, his voice low. "Young, stupid, thinking we'd conquer the world." Eleanor smiled, her eyes on the horizon. "We weren't stupid, just hopeful." He took her hand, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "I'm still hopeful," he said. She looked at him, her heart racing. For a moment, the world was just them. The lighthouse, and the endless sea. But the real world wasn't so simple. Ben, Eleanor's son, was still a wall between them. At 22, he was studying environmental science at UW, living in a chaotic house in the U District with roommates, who left pizza boxes everywhere. Eleanor invited him to dinner at her apartment, hoping to bridge the gap. She cooked his favorite, spaghetti carbonara, and brought up Daniel gently. "He's not trying to replace your dad," she said, passing the bread. Ben stared at his plate. "Then why does it feel like you're forgetting him?" Eleanor's throat tightened. "I'll never forget your dad, Ben. He gave me you." Ben looked up, his eyes glossy. "I just miss him, Mom." She reached for his hand, and he let her, a small victory. Later, she told Daniel about the conversation, her voice heavy. They were at a jazz club, the saxophone weaving through the air. "I don't know how to make this work," she said. Daniel leaned closer, his hand on hers. "We'll figure it out together. I'm not going anywhere." His words were a lifeline. But Eleanor still felt the weight of Ben's pain. She wondered if love was worth this kind of struggle, if she could balance her heart and her son's. The next day, she walked through Volunteer Park alone, stopping at the oak tree with their initials. EB+DH forever. She traced the letters, her fingers lingering. The past felt so close, but so did the fear of losing it all again. Eleanor's days at Pages and Rain became a mix of joy and tension. Customers noticed her distracted smiles, and Mia kept pushing her to just go for it with Daniel. One afternoon, a local author came in for a signing, and Eleanor threw herself into the event, organizing stacks of books and chatting with readers. But her mind was elsewhere, replaying Daniel's words at the lighthouse, Ben's pain at dinner, Sra's advice at the bar. She wanted to be brave, but bravery felt like stepping off a cliff. That evening, Daniel showed up at the bookstore with a thermos of hot chocolate and a plan. "Let's drive to the coast," he said, his eyes bright. "Just like we used to." She hesitated, the weight of her doubts heavy. But his smile was impossible to resist. They climbed into his old blue pickup truck, the one that still smelled faintly of leather and motor oil, and drove to Mukilteo, where a ferry waited to take them across Puget Sound. On the ferry, they stood at the railing, the wine stinging their faces. Daniel pulled her close, his arm around her shoulders. "Remember when we took this ferry in '95, he asked. "We thought we were so grown up, sneaking beers and talking about running away to Paris." Eleanor laughed, the memory sharp. "We were ridiculous. We were in love," he said, his voice soft. She looked at him, her heart pounding. The ferry horn blared, and they laughed, the tension easing. Back on land, they found a diner with a view of the water, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths, and waitresses who called you Han over clam chowder and fries. Daniel opened up about his marriage to Claire. "She wanted a big life," he said, stirring his coffee. "Fancy houses, trips to Europe. I just wanted a home, you know, somewhere to belong." Eleanor nodded, understanding. Mark wanted that too. Stability. But sometimes I felt like I was hiding in it. They sat in silence, the weight of their pasts settling between them. But it wasn't heavy, it was shared. As they drove back to Seattle, the radio played, "Under the Bridge," by Red Hot Chili Peppers, and they sang along, their voices off-key but joyful. For a moment, Eleanor felt like that 20-year-old girl again, fearless and free. But the moment didn't last. Back at the bookstore, Mia handed her a letter from Ben. He'd dropped it off while she was gone, a rare gesture from her quiet son. Eleanor opened it, her hands trembling. "Mom," it read, "I'm trying to understand, but it's hard. I don't want to lose you, too. Can we talk?" Her heart sank. She loved Daniel, but Ben was her world. How could she choose? That night, she called Sra again. meeting her at a coffee shop near Pike Place. The smell of roasted beans filled the air, and Sarah listened as Eleanor poured out her fears. "Ben's hurting," Eleanor said, her voice breaking. "I don't know how to fix it." Sarah sipped her espresso, her eyes kind but firm. "You don't fix it, Ellie. You listen. You co-op. He'll come around." Daniel, too, was grappling with his own uncertainties. His work as an architect was demanding, with late nights revising blueprints for a new community center in Seattle. He loved his job, but it pulled him away from Eleanor, reminding him of the mistakes he'd made in his 20s, when ambition sometimes overshadowed love. He didn't want to repeat that pattern. One morning, he met Laura for coffee in Tacoma, hoping to ease her doubts. They sat at a cafe with a view of the waterfront, the air thick with the smell of salt and coffee. Laura stirred her latte, her expression guarded. "You're different with her," she admitted, happier. "But I still worry, Danny. What if it falls apart again?" Daniel leaned back, his hands wrapped around his mug. "I know I messed up before. I let her go because I was scared, young, stupid. But I'm not that kid anymore. I want this, Laura. I want her." Laura's eyes softened, but she didn't let it go. "Just be careful. For both your sakes." Daniel nodded, but her words lingered. Was he being reckless? Diving back into a love that had once broken him? Back in Seattle, he and Eleanor went to a 90s themed trivia night at a bar in Fremont, a place packed with Genzers laughing over questions about Friends and Tamagotchis. They teamed up, their answers a mix of shared memories, Nirvana lyrics, the plot of Clueless, the name of Kurt Cobain's guitar. They didn't win, but they laughed until their sides hurt. Daniel's arm around her as they stumbled out into the rain. "We're still pretty good together," he said, pulling her close under an umbrella. Eleanor smiled, but her thoughts drifted to Ben. She hadn't responded to his letter yet, unsure what to say. The next day, she invited him to the bookstore, hoping a neutral space would help. Ben showed up, his hoodie damp from the drizzle, his expression guarded. "I just want you to be happy, Mom," he said, staring at the floor. "But it's weird, you know, seeing you with someone who's not Dad." Eleanor's heart ached. "I know, Ben. I miss your dad every day. But Daniel, he's part of me, too. Can you try to understand?" Ben nodded, but his eyes were distant. "I'll try," he said, and left without another word. Eleanor felt a flicker of hope, but it was fragile. That evening, Daniel took her to a jazz club, the same one they'd visited weeks ago. The saxophonist played My Funny Valentine, and Daniel reached for her hand. "I know this is hard," he said. "With Ben, with everything. But I'm here, Eleanor, for all of it." She squeezed his hand, tears in her eyes. "I want this, too," she said. "I'm just scared." He nodded, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "We'll be scared together." They danced, their movements slow and tentative, the music wrapping around them like a promise. But promises, Eleanor knew, were only as strong as the people who made them. The weeks that followed were a delicate balance. Eleanor and Daniel grew closer, their days filled with small, meaningful moments, sharing coffee at Pages and Rain, browsing vinyl records at a shop in Capitol Hill, watching the sunset from a bench in Discovery Park. But the challenges didn't vanish. Ben's reluctance lingered, and Eleanor felt torn between her love for Daniel and her duty to her son. She started inviting Ben to small outings with them, hoping to ease him into Daniel's presence. One Sunday, they met at Pike Place Market, wandering past fishmongers and flower stalls. Ben was quiet, but he didn't leave, which Eleanor took as progress. Daniel, sensing the tension, kept the conversation light, asking Ben about his studies. "Environmental science, huh?" Daniel said, tossing an apple between his hands. "That's cool. You saving the planet." Ben shrugged, but a small smile broke through. "Trying to, I guess." Eleanor's heart lifted. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Meanwhile, Laura's skepticism began to soften. She invited Daniel and Eleanor to a family barbecue in Tacoma, a test of sorts. Laura's kids, a 16-year-old boy and a 14-year-old girl, peppered Eleanor with questions about her bookstore, and she found herself relaxing, laughing at their stories. Laura watched from across the yard, her expression unreadable. Later, she pulled Eleanor aside. "You make him happy," she said, her voice low. I haven't seen him like this in years. Just don't break his heart. Eleanor nodded, her throat tight. I won't, she said, hoping she could keep that promise. Back at the bookstore, Mia became a cheerleader for their relationship, slipping romance novels onto Eleanor's desk with notes like, "Read this, it's you and Daniel." Eleanor laughed, but Mia's enthusiasm was infectious. One day, Mia shared her own story. She was dating a barista who wrote poetry, and they were navigating their own messy love story. "Love's like a book," Mia said, shelving a copy of Pride and Prejudice. "You gotta keep turning the pages, even when it's scary." Eleanor smiled, thinking of her own story with Daniel. Was she ready to turn the next page? That night, she and Daniel went to a concert at the Showbox, a band playing covers of 90's hits. The crowd sang along to Everlong by Foo Fighters, and Daniel pulled her close, their bodies swaying to the music. "This feels like us," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. Eleanor closed her eyes, letting the music carry her back to their college days, when love felt simple. But it wasn't simple now. Ben's words, Laura's warnings, her own fears, they all lingered. As they left the concert, the rain started again, and Daniel pulled her under an awning. "I love you, Eleanor," he said, his voice raw. "I always have." Her heart stopped. She wanted to say it back, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she kissed him, the rain falling around them, hoping her actions spoke louder than her fears. Eleanor's kiss under the awning was a leap, but her unspoken, "I love you," lingered like an unfinished sentence. She wanted to say it, to let the words spill out, but fear held her back. The rain kept falling, and Daniel held her close, his eyes searching hers. "You don't have to say anything," he said, his voice gentle. "I'll wait." His patience was a gift, but it also scared her. How could someone be so sure, when she was so uncertain? They walked back to his truck, the streets slick and shining under streetlights. The radio played, "Linger," by the Cranberries, and Eleanor felt the weight of their past. The years they'd lost, the years they might still have. At home, she sat in her apartment, the mixtape Daniel had given her spinning in her old CD player. The songs, Smashing Pumpkins, The National, felt like a bridge between then and now. She thought of Ben, his letter still unanswered on her kitchen table. She owed him a conversation, a real one. The next day, she invited him to a cafe near his UW dorm, a cozy spot with mismatched mugs, and the smell of fresh scones. Ben arrived, his hoodie damp, his expression guarded. "I'm trying, Mom," he said, stirring his coffee. "But it's hard. Dad was everything. And now you're with this guy I don't even know." Eleanor's heart ached. "Daniel's not replacing your dad, Ben. No one could. But he's part of my life, and I want you to be part of it, too." Ben looked away, his jaw tight. "I just need time," he said. She nodded, fighting tears. "Take all the time you need." Back at Pages and Rain, Eleanor threw herself into work, but Daniel's presence was a constant pull. He stopped by with lunch, a sandwich from a deli near Pike Place, and they sat in the back room, surrounded by stacks of books. "How's Ben?" he asked, his tone careful. Eleanor sighed. "He's trying. It's just complicated." Daniel nodded, his hand brushing hers. "I'll wait for him, too," he said. His words were steady, but Eleanor saw the worry in his eyes. He was carrying his own burdens, his sister's doubts, his demanding job, the shadow of his health scare. That evening, they went to a movie at a small theater in Capitol Hill, a re-release of Before Sunrise, a film they'd loved in college. The story of two strangers falling in love over one night felt like a mirror to their own story, and Eleanor felt Daniel's hand tighten around hers during the quiet moments. As they left, he turned to her under the neon marquee. "We're not strangers anymore," he said. "But I still feel like I'm discovering you." Eleanor smiled, her heart full but heavy. She wanted to discover him, too, but the fear of loss was a constant shadow. At home, she found herself digging through an old box, pulling out photos from the 90's, her and Daniel at a Nirvana concert, laughing in flannel shirts, their faces young and unguarded. She wanted that freedom again, but could she find it? The next week, Eleanor and Daniel planned a day trip to Bainbridge Island, a short ferry ride from Seattle. The ferry hummed across Puget Sound, the water gray and choppy under a cloudy sky. They stood at the railing, wine tugging at their coats, and Eleanor felt a spark of that old adventure they'd shared in college. "We used to talk about running away," she said, her voice almost lost in the wind. "Somewhere far, like Paris or Florence." Daniel laughed, his breath visible in the cold air. "We'd have been broke in a week, but we would have figured it out." They spent the day wandering Bainbridge's quiet streets, popping into a bookstore and a bakery, sharing a slice of blackberry pie. Daniel told her about his years in Chicago, how he'd thrown himself into work after his divorce, designing buildings to fill the emptiness. "It was never enough," he said, his eyes on the table. "I kept thinking about you, wondering where you were." Eleanor's throat tightened. "I thought about you, too," she admitted, "every time I passed a record store, or heard a 90s song." They walked to a small park, where autumn leaves crunched under their feet. Daniel stopped, pulling her close. "I don't want to lose you again," he said, his voice raw. Eleanor wanted to promise she'd stay, but Ben's face flashed in her mind. She kissed Daniel instead, letting the moment speak for her. Back in Seattle, Eleanor met Sarah at a cafe near Lake Union, the water glittering under the rare November sun. Sarah was glowing, fresh from a date with Greg, the photographer. "He's taking me to Portland next weekend," she said, her eyes bright. "You and Daniel should come." Eleanor hesitated. A trip felt like a big step, a commitment she wasn't sure she was ready for. "I'll think about it," she said. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Don't think too much, Ellie. You'll talk yourself out of it." Eleanor laughed, but Sarah's words hit home. She was overthinking, letting fear drive her decisions. That night, she called Ben, hoping to make progress. He agreed to meet at a diner in the U District, a place with neon signs and greasy fries. "I'm not saying I hate him," Ben said, dipping a fry in ketchup. "I just don't get why you need him." Eleanor took a deep breath. "He makes me feel alive, Ben. Like I'm not just going through the motions." Ben looked at her, his eyes searching. "Dad made you happy, didn't he?" She nodded. "He did. But Daniel's different. It's not better or worse, just different." Ben didn't respond, but he stayed, finishing his fries. It was a small step, but it felt like a victory. At the bookstore, Mia noticed Eleanor's lighter mood. "You're smiling more," she said, rearranging a display of poetry books. "Is it the guy?" Eleanor blushed. "Maybe." Mia grinned. "Told you love's worth it." Eleanor wanted to believe her, but the path to love was still paved with doubts. Daniel's life wasn't without its own complications. His latest project, a community center in Seattle's Central District, was behind schedule, and his boss was breathing down his neck. Late nights at the office meant less time with Eleanor, and he hated the distance it created. He remembered how he'd let work consume him in college, sketching designs while Eleanor waited for him to look up. He didn't want to make that mistake again. One evening, he surprised her with tickets to a Pearl Jam tribute band at a small venue in Fremont. The music was loud, the crowd a mix of aging Gen Zers and younger fans nostalgic for a decade they barely knew. They sang along to "Alive," their voices hoarse, and Daniel felt like he was 20 again, standing beside Eleanor in a sweaty concert hall. After the show, they walked through Fremont, the neon signs glowing in the mist. "I want this to work," he said, stopping under a streetlight. "But I know I've got to earn your trust." Eleanor looked at him, her eyes soft but guarded. "I'm trying, Daniel. I really am." They kissed, the world fading around them, but Eleanor's hesitation was palpable. She was still holding back, and Daniel didn't know how to bridge the gap. The next day, he met Laura for lunch at a taco truck near her school in Tacoma. She was softer now, less sharp-edged, but still protective. "You're in deep, aren't you?" she said, biting into a carnitas taco. Daniel nodded. "I love her, Laura. Always have." Laura sighed, wiping her hands. "Then don't screw it up this time." Her words were blunt, but there was a smile behind them, a sign she was coming around. Back at Pages and Rain, Eleanor was dealing with her own challenges. A pipe burst in the bookstore's bathroom, flooding the back room and damaging a shipment of books. She spent a day mopping floors and calling insurance, her stress mounting. Daniel showed up with coffee and a toolbox, offering to help. "You don't have to do this," she said, watching him patch a leak. He grinned, his hands dirty. "I want to." His presence steadied her, but the chaos of the day mirrored her inner turmoil. Could she build a life with him when so much felt uncertain? That night, she invited Ben to a family dinner at her apartment, hoping to ease the tension. She made lasagna, Mark's favorite, and set the table with care. Daniel was there, too, at Ben's reluctant agreement. The meal was awkward, with Ben answering in monosyllables and Daniel trying to keep things light. "So, Ben, you into music?" Daniel asked, passing the garlic bread. Ben shrugged. "Some." Eleanor jumped in, mentioning Ben's love for indie bands. It wasn't much, but it was a start. After Ben left, Daniel helped her clean up, his hands brushing hers as they washed dishes. "We're getting there," he said, his voice hopeful. Eleanor nodded, but her heart was still caught between hope and fear. The holiday season brought new challenges and opportunities. Seattle was aglow with Christmas lights, the air sharp with the smell of pine and roasted chestnuts. Eleanor and Daniel joined Sarah and Greg for a tree lighting ceremony at Westlake Center, the crowd singing carols as snowflakes dusted their coats. Eleanor felt a warmth she hadn't in years, standing beside Daniel, their gloved hands intertwined. But Ben's absence weighed on her. He'd opted to spend the evening with friends, still keeping his distance. Sarah noticed her mood and pulled her aside. "Give him time, Ellie," she said, her breath visible in the cold. "He's figuring it out." Eleanor nodded, but the ache persisted. Later, she and Daniel walked through Pike Place, the market stalls festive with wreaths and lights. They bought hot cider and sat on a bench, watching tourists snap photos. "I want you to meet my family," Daniel said, his voice tentative. "Laura's hosting Christmas. Come with me." Eleanor hesitated. Meeting Laura again, in a family setting, felt like a big step. "I'll think about it," she said, sipping her cider. Daniel nodded, but she saw the flicker of disappointment in his eyes. At the bookstore, Mia was in full holiday spirit, decorating the windows with snowflakes and string lights. "You're going to that Christmas thing, right?" she asked, taping a paper Santa to the glass. Eleanor sighed. "It's complicated." Mia rolled her eyes. "You keep saying that, but it's not. You love him. He loves you. Go." Eleanor laughed, but Mia's words echoed Sarah's. Was she making it harder than it needed to be? On Christmas Eve, she decided to go. Daniel picked her up in his truck, the radio playing, "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas." Laura's house in Tacoma was warm and chaotic, filled with her kids, her husband, and a table piled with food. Laura greeted Eleanor with a cautious smile, offering her a glass of wine. "Glad you're here," she said. And Eleanor sensed a shift, a tentative acceptance. The evening was loud and joyful, with Laura's kids teasing Daniel about his old mullet, and Eleanor sharing stories about her bookstore. But when Laura pulled her aside to help with dessert, the conversation turned serious. "He's different with you," Laura said, slicing pie. "Happier. But he's fragile, you know." That heart scare changed him. Eleanor nodded, her throat tight. "I'm fragile, too," she admitted. Laura's eyes met hers, and for the first time, Eleanor felt like they understood each other. Back in Seattle, Eleanor invited Ben to join her and Daniel for New Year's Eve at a small party at Sarah's place. Ben agreed, surprising her. The party was cozy, with fairy lights and a playlist of 90s hits. Ben was quiet but stayed, even chatting with Daniel about a documentary they'd both seen. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. As the clock struck midnight, Daniel kissed Eleanor, the room cheering around them. "Here's to us," he whispered. The new year brought a sense of possibility, but also new tensions. Daniel's work picked up with deadlines looming for the community center project. He spent long hours at the office, and Eleanor felt the distance growing, echoes of their college days, when his ambition left her waiting. She tried not to let it bother her, but the old insecurities crept in. Was she enough for him? Could she compete with his ambition? One evening, they met at a jazz club in Belltown, the same one where they'd danced weeks ago. The saxophonist played Blue and Green, and Daniel seemed distracted, checking his phone. "Everything okay?" Eleanor asked, her voice tight. He sighed, setting the phone down. "Work's a mess. The client's pushing for changes, and I'm drowning." Eleanor nodded, but her heart sank. "You don't have to do it all alone," she said. He looked at her, his eyes softening. "I know. I'm trying to balance it, Eleanor. I don't want to lose you." They danced, but the rhythm felt off, like they were out of step. Back at Pages and Rain, the bookstore was thriving, with a new book club drawing crowds. Mia led the discussions, her enthusiasm infectious, but Eleanor struggled to focus. She kept thinking about Daniel's distraction, Ben's slow progress, her own fears. One afternoon, a customer asked for a copy of Love in the Time of Cholera, and Eleanor found herself rereading it, struck by the story of love delayed but never forgotten. It felt like a sign, but she wasn't sure what it meant. She invited Ben to another dinner, this time at a pizza place near his dorm. He showed up, his mood lighter, and they talked about his classes, his plans to intern at a conservation nonprofit. "I'm trying to get it, Mom," he said, slicing his pizza. "Daniel seems okay. I just miss Dad sometimes." Eleanor reached for his hand. "I miss him, too. But loving Daniel doesn't mean I love your dad any less." Ben nodded, his eyes softer. "I know. I'm working on it." It was a small breakthrough, but it gave Eleanor hope. She told Daniel about it, over coffee at a shop near Pike Place, the air thick with the smell of roasted beans. "He's coming around," she said, her voice hopeful. Daniel smiled, but his eyes were tired. "That's good, Eleanor. Really good." She noticed the strain in his voice, the weight of his work, his health scare, his sister's warnings. "Are you okay?" she asked. He hesitated, then nodded. "Just feeling the pressure. But I'm here for you." His words were a comfort, but Eleanor sensed the cracks beneath them. They walked through the market, past stalls of flowers and fish, and she wanted to hold on to this moment, to believe they could weather any storm. But the rain kept falling, and love, she knew, was as fragile as it was beautiful. Spring bloomed in Seattle, and Eleanor felt her love for Daniel deepen, though fears lingered. They explored the city, Volunteer Park, Pike Place, Alki Beach, sharing coffee at Pages and Rain, dancing to 90's music at the Showbox. Ben, her son, was warming to Daniel, joining them for market strolls or movie nights, his smiles rare but growing. "I'm trying, Mom," he said at a cafe near Lake Union, his voice soft. "I see how Daniel looks at you." Eleanor hugged him, hope rising. Daniel's sister, Laura, softened too, inviting them to Tacoma for family dinners. "You make him happy," she told Eleanor, her eyes kind. At the bookstore, Mia's events thrived, and Eleanor's poems gained notice, her voice steady as she read, "In the rain, we mend, hearts that time could never end." Daniel's pride warmed her, but his health scare and demanding job stirred old doubts. "I'm here," he promised at a diner, the jukebox playing, "Linger." Eleanor wanted to trust him, but loss haunted her, Mark's death, Ben's pain. Sarah, her friend, urged her forward at a West Seattle brunch. "Don't let fear win, Ellie." Eleanor nodded, writing poems about love and second chances, her confidence growing. Summer brought picnics and concerts, Ben bonding with Daniel over vinyls at Fremont Market. A Portland trip with Sarah and Greg felt like a leap, Daniel whispering, "I want adventures with you," as they wandered Powell's books. Back home, Ben admitted, "He's good for you, Mom," a milestone that eased Eleanor's heart. Fall painted Seattle gold, and Eleanor read poems at Pages and Rain. Daniel's mural drawing crowds. Laura called her family, and Ben joined them for a camping trip, laughing with Daniel by the fire. Winter wrapped the city in quiet, but their love burned bright. At a Christmas reading, Ben and Laura's kids helped, and Daniel gave Eleanor a journal, embossed with EB+DH, "For your poems," he said, his crooked smile warm. They drove to Alki Beach, the radio playing, Black, waves crashing. "Do you think we'll make it?" Eleanor asked. Daniel's smile was steady. "We already have." They kissed, the rain falling softly. Eleanor knew love wasn't perfect, fears, doubts, and Ben's journey lingered. But she'd found it in Seattle's gray. And with Daniel, she was ready to face the future, their story unfolding one rainy day at a time.